Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Danielle. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today on November 2nd when this is being released. I'm recording this on November 1st. It is 4:37 when I am starting, and daylight savings time is here. It was funny. I went to lunch with my sister today, and I was like, let's go at like 12:30, and she was like, it's technically 12:30 on old time, so let's go early. And I was like, okay. Do you guys like daylight savings? I love it. I feel like I'm in the minority. I just am such a grandma that when it gets dark early, I have no excuse to be in bed early. Like, to not be in bed early. I'll get into that later, but I just really love going to bed early, and daylight savings, I love it being light all the time, but daylight savings makes it feel like winter, makes it feel like fall. You know, I could like put a blanket on, have a sweatshirt on. I have like my little hoodie on right now as well. I'm drinking some water. I hope you guys all had a fantastic Halloween when you were listening this past weekend. What did you guys do? What were your costumes? I did Jim and Pam on Friday night with my boyfriend. And Saturday, my friends and I did Space Cowgirls. The most original costume in the entire world. I spent all day Saturday on the couch. Was not even hungover. I was just done wanting to watch football. But it was a good week of college football, which we'll get into. But daylight savings is here. Also, the election is tomorrow when you're listening to this. Maybe you're listening to it on Tuesday. The election is tomorrow. And I think it goes without saying, this is a pretty important election. I don't know how many times I've stressed that. I've probably stressed it so many times on these podcasts. You guys are like, oh my gosh, we gotta vote. But if you have not voted yet, I believe that early voting has closed in a lot of states. Obviously, when you're listening to this, if you can, go to your polls, drop your ballot off at a ballot box. Don't mail in. At this point, it's too late. I'm stressed. I am really stressed. I was talking to my friends about it, and honestly, the reason I have not been sleeping well lately is because of this. I'm just constantly worried. Regardless of who you vote for, it is a stressful time. I don't remember. Maybe because I was 17 at the last election, and in all honesty, I didn't pay attention, which is my fault and my bad. I was ignorant and blind, and I just thought Hillary was going to win. It was a landslide. Yeah, and I'm a little stressed. But the election is tomorrow. What do you guys have for your election day? De-stressing. I plan to have the TV on literally all day. And yeah, I'm incredibly nervous. I'm scared for how social media is going to be that day. Everyone's talking about how there's going to be like a civil war, jokingly. But I'm scared personally. Anyways, I hope you guys all had a happy Halloween, happy daylight savings. Yeah, it's funny, I'm recording this and it's like the sun's literally going down in my eyesight. But let's get into this fun week of football, shall we? You guys know I do my Sunday rundowns, but changing it up a little, we're going to go conference by conference, so 4 segments today. We're going to kick it off with a good old-fashioned ACC conference. I switched it up in the outline that I had. The sun is blinding me. Oh my gosh. But yeah, it was a fun week of college football, to say the least. I first want to say rest up to Trevor Lawrence, who tested positive for COVID on Thursday. We will get into all of that when we get to Clemson's game. But first, let's kick it off with an upset, people. We have UNC, University of North Carolina, versus Virginia. The Virginia Cavaliers took down the UNC Tar Heels 44-41 on Saturday in one of the South's oldest rivalries. It dates back over 100 years, I believe. But Brennan Armstrong threw for 3 touchdowns and ran for another, and Virginia scored 28 consecutive points before holding out to beat number 15 North Carolina 44-41 on Saturday night. The star of the show is Shane Simpson for the Cavaliers running back. He had an electric touchdown run in the first half, as well as Rashawn Henry. He had 18 yards, Tony Polijan for 17, and the latter gave the Cavaliers a 41-20 lead with 5:34 to go in the third quarter. The Tar Heels made it close behind a fantastic performance from their consistent, excellent quarterback Sam Howell and receiver Jeremy Brown. The pair hooked it up for 3 of Sam Howell's 4 touchdowns, covering 54, 10, and 13 yards. Howell also hit Crafty Brown with a slant pass that he took 76 yards to the end zone. Howell did all he could do, but at the end of the day, this was not enough. UNC intercepted Armstrong to get within 41-34 early in the fourth quarter. They held Virginia to a field goal there, and Virginia just could not get it back from there. They had the momentum of the interception, but you guys also have to realize that Virginia did score right before the first half. So they had the Virginia momentum going into the second half. Brennan Armstrong hobbled up a 3-yard run while the Cavaliers got the ball back in the fourth quarter. Howell finished 23 of 28 yards for 433 yards, and Demi Brown caught 11 passes for 240. As a sophomore last year, he had 6 receptions for 202 yards and 3 more touchdowns, according to 538 Sports. Armstrong was 12 of 22 for 208 yards and ran for 36 yards as the Cavaliers piled up 210 rushing yards from Shane Simpson mostly. He was the star of the show. The highlights you've seen have probably involved his run. But like I said, the Cavaliers used 2 gifts to grab a 24-20 lead 1 minute and 14 seconds before halftime. Armstrong was sacked for a 7-yard loss, but a personal foul from UNC kept them alive. And then the punt returner for UNC muffled the punt, and long snapper Tucker Flinkston recovered at the 20. 3 plays later, Thompson ran in. The Cavaliers allowed a touchdown on their second play at Miami last week, waited twice as long at that time. Howell hit Garnett for 15 yards on 3rd and 4. He hit Demi Brown for 54 yards and a 7-0 lead just after 1:25. So UNC had the early lead. Virginia came back. So, some things we can take from this. UNC will likely fall out of the rankings here. Virginia could have a chance to swoop in or make a statement. Shane Simpson looked amazing in this game. That's all we can say about that. Absolutely amazing. Performed his heart out. And this was a big upset. UNC has struggled. Obviously, they did lose to Florida State a few weeks ago. And they've struggled a little since then. So, it is likely UNC falls out of the polls after being number 5 just a few weeks ago, which is kind of crazy. But that's how fast life changes in college football, if you will. Next up, we have Virginia Tech and Louisville. The Louisville Cardinals versus the Virginia Tech Hokies. Virginia Tech won 42-35 after suffering the worst game of his career in the Virginia Tech football game against Wake Forest. Hendon Hooker responded with probably one of his best games. He rushed for 3 touchdowns, completed 10 of 10 for 183 yards to lift the Hokies to a 42-35 victory over Louisville on Saturday, played at Cardinals Stadium. With this win, the Hokies moved to 4-2 overall and 4-2 in the ACC. Louisville fell to 2-5 and 1-5 in league play. Behind Hooker, the Hokies ran all over Cardinals right from the start, opening a 21-0 lead and then scored on 4 consecutive possessions in the second half to pull away. Awfully proud of our guys. Congrats to our players and our staff, Virginia Tech coach John Fluitt said. Louisville was missing 6 defensive starters for undisclosed reasons, but they did cut Tech's lead to 42-35 on a 16-yard touchdown pass from Malik Cunningham. The Hokies did recover the onside ball and run the clock out for victory. Tech's offense, like I said, put together a very impressive performance. They got 466 yards total in the game. Tech rushed for more than 200 yards in their 6th consecutive game, did not turn the ball over, and scored in all 5 of their red zone opportunities. Furthermore, Cunningham paced the Cardinals by throwing a career-high 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was, however, intercepted 3 times. So this is Virginia Tech recovering from a difficult loss. They were ranked last week, and they fell. Hendon Hooker now has 5 rushing touchdowns on the season, which is pretty dang impressive, people, if you don't mind me saying so myself. Next up, we have Notre Dame versus Georgia Tech. I'm sorry if you can hear that. My parents opened the garage. I'm recording on my apartment floor. Notre Dame versus Georgia Tech. Notre Dame undefeated still. They are facing Clemson next week, obviously. Many people wanting to discount this game. Notre Dame didn't. Obviously, they won 31-13. And I guess what we can say is this was a defensive game by Notre Dame. This was a defensive game by the Fighting Irish. They have the big game against Clemson next week, which many people are rearranging their lines and their bets on it and who's going to win because of the Trevor Lawrence news we will get to. But you know your defense is really good when you don't pile up, you don't play up to your normal standard, and you still completely dominate your defense. Your opponent, that is exactly what the Fighting Irish did in a 31-13 victory over Georgia Tech. Don't get me wrong, the defense was still really good, but there are some mistakes and miscues that we aren't used to seeing from this group. In spite of these mistakes, the defense controlled the actions throughout the game. It was a combination of talent, good scheme, and the fact that mistakes compared to the standards are relatively few. Notre Dame was ranked number 4 this week, obviously. It was a dominant but not spectacular performance. They made some uncharacteristic mistakes, but they left Atlanta with a stress-free win. Like I said, they have a showdown with number 1 Clemson looming just 7 days away. Notre Dame got off to a fast start at Bobby Dodd Stadium. The Fighting Irish opened the game with a 15-play, 91-yard scoring drive. Ian Bach found Joe Wilkins Jr. in the end zone for an 8-yard touchdown to put Notre Dame up 7-0. Notre Dame controlled the clock for 8 minutes and 30 seconds on its opening drive. Notre Dame defense kept Georgia Tech's offense off the scoreboard in the first half, limiting the Yellow Jackets to 66 total yards and only 5 first downs in the first half. The Irish defense continued to flex its muscle in the second half. On the opening drive, Dalen Hayes hit quarterback Jeff Sims, causing a fumble that Mylan Tagovailoa Amison recovered. Notre Dame needed 6 plays to march 65 yards, capped off by Keon Williams' second touchdown of the afternoon to put Notre Dame up 24-7. So we have Clemson on the horizon. Obviously, bad loss for Georgia Tech, but the real story of this game, no offense to Georgia Tech, is the Clemson-Notre Dame game. I think a lot of people, like we saw Alabama-Georgia, this is a huge game, and it's going to be offense versus defense, but, as I will get into with our next game, college football's best player is not playing in the biggest game of the season for him, besides the playoffs, if they go to the playoffs. Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence tested positive for COVID-19 on Thursday. Like everybody knows, I wish him well. I wish him the best recovery. He will not play in Notre Dame next week because he will have cleared quarantine, but the cardiovascular issues that go into that, as Dabo Swinney pointed out, make him ineligible and a risk in getting back into condition after being off the grid for that long. But with star quarterback Trevor Lawrence at home due to COVID-19, the top-ranked Clemson Tigers needed a double-digit second-half rally to beat the Boston College Eagles 34-28 on Saturday. Did anyone else watch the Joe Tessitore call when his son, who was a long snapper for Boston College, had a trick play, and the joy on his face. I mean, it made me smile, and I don't even have kids or have any experience with that. I just think it's really amazing. Football is amazing. But they did it behind freshman quarterback DJ Uligali. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to pronounce his name yet. He made his first career start in place of Lawrence and 2-time ACC Player of the Year, Travis Etienne. The duo took over the game in the second half to raise an 18-point deficit. Etienne really came in handy. His decision to stay back and not go to the NFL is looking more and more valuable. Clemson did not find out until Thursday afternoon that Lawrence had tested positive, and at this point their game plan had put out. Practice had been set, and they were just going to do run-throughs to solidify their details. Offensive coordinator Tony Elliott, however, did not change the plan with DJ as their starter, believing the freshman could get the job done. He did come on campus as an early rollee in January with the confidence behind him and knew the moment would not be too big for him. When head coach Dabo Swinney delivered the news that he would start, he found the quarterback studying game tape. He went 30 for 41 for 342 yards with 2 touchdowns, while Etienne, a senior, set the record for set an ACC career rushing record and a career-high 264 all-purpose yards with 2 touchdowns to help the Tigers stay undefeated. They were at one point down 28-7, which absolutely bonkers. I saw that notification and I was like, oh my gosh. I discounted that game a little, but Clemson had 3 straight touchdown drives to start the second half, and his 30-yard touchdown run opened the scoring in the second half. On the next possession, he threw an 8-yard touchdown pass to Amari Rogers. Boston College had several opportunities to take the lead in the fourth quarter, but came up short with 1:18 left and Boston College deep in its own territory. Quarterback Phil Djokovic called for intentional grounding. Ended grounding in the end zone, resulted in a safety, and Clemson scored 24 unanswered points. Like I said, Swinney announced that Lawrence would miss next week's game at number 4 Notre Dame, so DJ will start. His performance on Saturday should do nothing but help his confidence moving forward. So, Lawrence not playing that Notre Dame game. Notre Dame is the game everyone's kind of had circled. That was the big game when we were looking at the Notre Dame joining the ACC. It's kind of crazy. It's definitely crazy. But coming up, we are going to get into some Big Ten action, people. It is the second week of the Big Ten being back, so stay tuned.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hello, everybody, and we are back on the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Danielle, and we are back with our second segment of the day, where we are looking at Big Ten action from this past week. The game, not the biggest game, I will admit. There was bias here, but the Wisconsin-Nebraska game was canceled due to a Wisconsin COVID-19 outbreak. Needless to say, my boyfriend, who I've met as a big Nebraska fan, was very sad. It's a funny story. On Saturday morning, we woke up and we went out Friday night, but we're grandparents, guys. Like, it's really bad. There's a joke running, like, we don't stay past 9. We, on Friday night, went to a little house, like, less than 10 people gathering. We made it till 8:30. Last night on Halloween, after we watched the football games, we went out, we made it till 7:30. Like, we also are binging Prison Break right now. Anyways, not watch that show. What are you doing? It's on Hulu. We both seen it, but we forgot everything that happens. It is so stinking good. Anyways, he was so excited to wake up Saturday and, like, get bagels and watch the Nebraska game. And I was like, I told you, like, 3 days ago. He's like, I thought you were kidding. So he's a little sad about that. But anyways, Big Ten football. That game was obviously canceled, but other games still happened. So first up, we have Purdue versus Illinois. Illinois is coming off a crushing defeat versus the previously mentioned Wisconsin Badgers in their season opener. Illinois was COVID-19 decimated, and they got defeated by Purdue 31-24. Aiden O'Connell, the Purdue quarterback, passed for 2 touchdowns, and they hung on to beat, like I said, a limited team that was down to its 4th-string quarterback 31-24 on Saturday. Despite its woes, Illinois managed to make a game of it. 4th-string quarterback Conan Taylor's pass fell short, and the Boilermakers took over on downs with less than 2 minutes to go in the game. That sealed the victory. O'Connell finished 29 of 36 passing for 376 yards and the 2 scores for Purdue. David Bell was his favorite target, catching 9 passes for 122 yards and a touchdown. Boeheim was back on the sideline for the Boilermakers after missing the last game with a positive COVID-19 test. His brother, offensive coordinator Brian Boeheim, coached the team in his absence. Things went a little bit differently for Illinois. Sophomore Taylor found himself at the helm of the team's second possession following what appeared to be an ankle injury to last-minute starter and third-string quarterback Matt Robinson. Taylor only took a couple of reps with the team last week with 17 of 29 for 233 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was intercepted twice. Coach Lovie Smith, fighting Illinois, said, "Did we play hard? Did we handle tough situation? Yes, we did. We're not in a bubble. We live in the real world. I thought everyone stepped up and did a good job." Illinois starting quarterback Brandon Peters was announced as a scratch shortly before kickoff after testing positive for COVID-19 on Thursday. His backup also missed the game to contact tracing protocols, said Illinois spokesperson Kent Brown. In all, 12 Illinois players did miss the game, including field goal kicker James McCourt. The big takeaways from this are that Purdue did what they had to do and came in with a solid win over a team that wasn't expected to put up much of a fight, even with an impacted roster. Illinois was frightful. The game was frightful. A rash of COVID-19 positive results, and the first quarter injury to fill-in starter was left them with 4th-string quarterback Taylor, who was who was lifted for one play in the second half after being sacked. Things looked bad for Illinois the next couple of games. So, we could take it from that. Rough day for Illinois, but you have to remember they were decimated by injuries this past few weeks due to COVID-19. So, yes. Next up, people. Ooh, the Big Ten game of the day, in my opinion. Move over, Ohio State, Penn State. We got Michigan State versus Michigan, one of the biggest rivalries for both teams. No one expected Michigan, who was ranked 13th at the time, to win. Michigan State pulled up the upset 27-24. I can't admit I was not necessarily rooting for the team, Michigan State. Not necessarily rooting, but if you guys know what happened with Mel Tucker and Colorado back in the winter. Still some saltiness there, not gonna lie. But outside of Michigan State's football program, few expected the Spartans to beat number 13 Michigan. The people who mattered, though, had all the confidence they needed to pull off the upset. Rocky Lombardi threw for 332 yards, including 196 to Ricky White, and 3 touchdowns helped Michigan State Spartans stun the Michigan Wolverines 27-24. At one point, the game was 27-17, and I was like, I turned it off. I was like, oh, there's 4 minutes left. No, game's over. Game wasn't over. Michigan fought back. They got a touchdown and a field goal. They got a touchdown, tried to march for a field goal, didn't happen. Tucker became just the second coach to beat Michigan in its first attempt with the Spartans, joining Alabama coach Nick Saban, who did it in 1995. The former Colorado coach started his career as an assistant graduate for Saban at Michigan State. The Wolverines were favored by 20-plus points and ended up needing a late score to avoid double digits. Harbaugh's team never led and didn't appear to have much energy in front of family and friends in a mostly empty stadium that holds over 100,000 plus when there isn't a pandemic. Running back Hassan Haskins ran up a 2-run score with 37 seconds left to pull Michigan within 3 points. The onside kick was recovered by Michigan State running back Connor Hayward. Lombardi converted a 4th and 2 from the Michigan 36 with a sneak to seal the victory. The big play of the game was by linebacker Ajante Simmons. He broke up Haskins' pass in the end zone intended for tight end Carter Selzer. Haskins acknowledged he was open. It was my fault. I should have put it up more. The Wolverines settled for a field goal. They cut their deficit to 14-10 late in the first half. Michigan's Joe Milton went 32 for 51 for 300 yards, ran 12 times for 59 yards, and blamed himself for the loss. The big takeaway from this is that Michigan State's Tucker's team bounced back from a 7-turnover setback in last week's 38-27 loss to Rutgers with a signature win early in his tenure. For Michigan, Harbaugh has a lot to work on for this team, especially in the secondary that was picked on early and often by the Spartans. Michigan is expected to fall severely in the rankings, while Michigan State might get some votes. Next up, we have 2 teams that shocked many people by surprise last week when Indiana upset Penn State and Rutgers beat Michigan State. But this week, number 17 Indiana took on Rutgers and won 37-21. Michael Penix Jr. came through again for the the Indiana Hoosiers. So did the defense. No need to count the wild play. If anyone saw that play, it should have been counted on principle. I mean, oh my gosh, such a crazy play. Wow. It was, how do I describe it? Look it up. It was the 17th ranked Hoosiers had a chance to be the surprise of the Big Ten conference season, which I definitely see given Penn State's performance the past few weeks. And the fact that Wisconsin has not had a chance to play, as well as some other teams. But Penix threw 3 touchdown passes and ran for another score, and the Hoosiers intercepted 3 passes and limited Rutgers to 248 yards and a 37-21 win Saturday. Penix, once again, 3 touchdown passes of 15, 2, and 1 yards. He also had a quarterback sneak. This is their best start in their conference since 1991, and that might just mean Indiana is good this season. Tight end Peyton Hendershot said, I think we're the only ones who believe that. We believed that for a long time. I'm so happy for our coach, Tom Allen, because he put so much work in for us, and he believed for such a long time and put in so much effort. The Hoosiers win will last. People may always remember the Stanford band-like play that got the score, if you guys know what I'm talking about. So the big takeaway from here. If Indiana can stay healthy and Penix keeps performing the way he is, there's no doubt in my mind that the Hoosiers might be the surprise of the Big Ten and football this season. They have a chance to be ranked in the top 15 for the first time since the 1980s. Rutgers, their defense kept them in this game. Their offense took a big step back, but they allowed too much pressure in passing situations. Like I said, And last up on our Big Ten games to watch out for this week, we have Ohio State, Penn State, 38-25 Ohio State. Ohio State traveled to Happy Valley, Pennsylvania. Their first Ohio State's first play from scrimmage, went for 62 yards, and the number 3 Buckeyes held on to score win over number 2 overall. I completely lost my train of thought. They beat number 18 Penn State 38-25 on Halloween Saturday night. Justin Fields finished with another stellar day on the stat sheet, accounting for 4 touchdown passes as a part of his second 300-yard passing day of the season. Master Teague rumbled for 100 of 208 total yards on the ground for the Buckeyes. And for the second game in a row, Garrett Wilson and Chris Oley topped the 100 mark for receiving. Wilson piled in 11 catches for 111 yards, while Oley had 7 grabs for 120 and 2 scores. The Buckeyes set the tone on 3 consecutive run plays, starting with a Garrett Wilson end around for 62 yards. Penn State placed its first points on the board with a 31-yard field goal that took almost 6 minutes to do. The Buckeyes recovered from a misfire on a short field goal attempt early in the quarter. The Buckeyes shipped off a 6-minute run with a Luke Farrell touchdown. The Nittany Lions hit the end zone for the first time Saturday on its initial drive of the second half. Sean Clifford connected with Javon Dotson for a 14-yard out, ending an 8-play, 75-yard to start the game. There's no doubt about it. Penn State will probably fall from the rankings after they say they just didn't look good. They looked sloppy, unprepared. Not having fans in their stands is a huge minus, but they looked very sloppy and unprepared. And Ohio State still looks pretty freaking good, guys. Ohio State, yeah, they look good. They look good, people. So there you have it. That is our Big Ten recap. And coming up, we are going to be getting into our third segment, which is looking at the Big 12. So stick around.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everybody, and we are back with our third segment of today. We are going to be getting into the Big 12 games of the week. First off, let's start with West Virginia and Kansas State. West Virginia pulled off the upset against the number 16 Kansas State Wildcats on Saturday with a 37-10 win. Taking the field as a road underdog on Saturday afternoon was nothing new for Kansas State, but they left after a 37-10 loss. And their first Big Ten defeat of the season was a different experience for the Wildcats. K-State came up with just 2 tacks and jumped out to an early lead in Morgantown before West Virginia used a strong second quarter to put away the Wildcats. I think our efforts were good. We just didn't have great execution today, Chris Kleiman said. Had our chances early, maybe punch the first score instead of getting 3. That didn't help us. We had a couple opportunities late in the first quarter or second quarter, and we didn't do anything with that. We were very good on third down or defense. Drew Wiley said, for us today, it was probably the pass action plays that we really struggled with. Malik Knowles came up with a 35-yard touchdown grab to give the Wildcats a boost heading into the break. However, early in the second half, K-State defense did its part to get back in the game, holding West Virginia to a field goal attempt, but really, Kansas State could do nothing. Against the Mountaineers defense, the Kansas State The Wildcats struggled to establish the run game that helped them pull up the upset against Oklahoma and TCU this season. Saturday also marked the first game of the season where the Wildcats failed to come up with an interception, while 3 picks helped the West Virginia defense control the flow of the game. Howard finished 19 of 37 for 184 yards and a touchdown. Next up on the Big Ten games of the week, this was the biggest game of the week for the Big Ten, was Texas Oklahoma State, people. So Texas scored its first road win over a top 10 team in 10 years while simultaneously dealing a blow to the Big 12's playoff chances with a 41-34 overtime victory at Oklahoma State on Saturday. Remember when I was saying Oklahoma State had the chance to go into the college football playoffs? Well, don't know about that anymore. Just because Texas won, this does not mean they're back in business by any means. However, this is a pretty big win. The win came through with the Longhorns the Longhorns were outgained by a lot. The Cowboys finished with 530 total offensive yards to Texas's 287. Entering Saturday, Big 12 teams were 320 since 2004. This was not pretty, Texas coach Tom Herman said. But when you get the chance to take away the ball 4 times and you don't turn it over at all, you give yourself a chance to win. This is the first time the Longhorns defeated an AP top 25 team on the road since falling to number 5 Nebraska in 2010. It comes just 3 weeks after the Longhorns suffered consecutive losses at TCU and Oklahoma, which caused fans concern about the state of the program under Herman, who is at his 4th year in Austin. We are a lot different team than we were back then. We have a lot of work to do. The Longhorns have now won 2 games in a row and are within reach of a berth in the Big 12 championship game. This is the first loss for Oklahoma State, who entered Saturday as the last undefeated team in the Big 12 and the league's best hope at making the college football playoffs. However, the Cowboys now just have a 1.5 chance of reaching the playoff. The Cowboys' major mistakes will come back to haunt them. In addition to 4 turnovers, Oklahoma State also committed a roughing the kicker penalty on 4th quarter Texas punt that gave the Longhorns the ball back. Texas wound up scoring on this drive. It also had 18 points off of 4 Oklahoma State turnovers. Disciplined football, special teams, and turnover is what determines the outcomes of games until you get to the latter part of the season, and we failed in those areas, and this is the result you get. Texas' victory can be thanked in part to the play of linebacker Joseph Osai and quarterback Sam Ehlinger. Ehlinger's stats were not eye-popping, but he made 2 crucial touchdown passes in the 4th quarter and overtime. So Texas is expected to potentially move back into the rankings, which is pretty dang exciting, people. But other than that, those are the 2 Big 12 games of the week to talk about. And coming up, people, we are going to go into the SEC, the final conference of the week. So stay tuned.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the final segment today on the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Let's get into it, people. The SEC. By the way, did you guys like the breakdowns of segments? I personally did. I'll probably change you this format. I think it's better, personally, but that's just me. The SEC, the Southeastern Conference. First up, we have number 14. I also forgot to mention these games were played on Halloween. Sorry, that just completely slipped my mind. We have number 5, Georgia, who went against University of Kentucky. They won 14-3, despite only producing 2 scoring outcomes. The 5th-ranked Georgia Bulldogs, who are now 4-1 in the SEC, rode their defense to a 14-3 victory over the Kentucky Wildcats. This was an SEC network televised event, and 12,000 spectators were at Kroger Field in Kentucky. Redshirt sophomore Zamir White led the Georgia offense with a career-high 136 rushing yards on 26 carries and a touchdown. Redshirt junior quarterback Stetson Bennett finished 19 of 13, passing for 131 yards and rushing for a touchdown. Georgia's offense amassed 346 yards despite possessing the ball for 10 fewer minutes than Kentucky. In a terrific effort for the Georgia defense, only allowed 229 yards of offense and 15 first downs, along with causing 4 sacks and a fumble. Sophomore linebacker Nogopi Deem led the unit with a career-high 14 tackles, while senior safety Richard LeConte also notched a new career high with 13 tackles and a fumble recovery. Georgia head coach Kirby Smart said, "We executed well at times. We ran the ball against a pretty good physical Kentucky defense. I was pleased with that. It's hard to make yourself throw when you're running successfully." After forcing a Kentucky punt on the first possession, Georgia established itself quickly on the ground, rushing on every play on its way to a 2-yard touchdown run for Bennett. The 12-play, 86-yard drive took over 5 minutes off the clock and gave the Bulldogs an early 7-0 lead midway through the first quarter. Following a pair of punts from each team, Kentucky embarked on a marathon drive of its own that drained much of the second quarter clock. The Wildcats kept the defense alive with a 4th-and-1 conversion on the Bulldogs' 43-yard line. Kentucky did a great job of shortening the game. Coach Kirby Smart said they know that they were probably outmatched and they shrunk the game. They ran the ball and didn't have many chances, but they stayed on schedule. Next up, Georgia will go to a critical SEC East matchup against number 8 Florida next Saturday. This is an annual rivalry. It will kick off at 3:30 p.m. and will be televised on CBS. Next up, people, we got the CBS game of the week. We got Auburn LSU, and this was not a game of the week. Auburn defeated the defending champions LSU Tigers, who are now 2-3, 48-11. Auburn did not need any Halloween tricks on this year. It was all treats for the Tigers on Saturday, as they dominated LSU, winning 48-11 inside Jordan O'Hare Stadium. It was Auburn's biggest win over LSU in series history, surpassing the previous total of 35. And it was also the most points Auburn has ever scored against LSU. After a scoreless first quarter, Auburn struck first in the opening minutes of the second quarter with a 9-yard touchdown pass to from Bo Nix to Eli Strove. The score was set up by an Auburn defense and quarterback Nehemiah Pritchett, who pulled away his first career interception and ran it back 48 yards. Some big notes to take away from this were there was 17,000 people in the stands. Auburn has scored in 99 consecutive games. Pretty cool. 48 points is the most scored ever in an Auburn LSU game. This tops 41 by Auburn in 1999 and 2014. And yeah, not much to say about this game. LSU did not look their best. The defending champions are struggling, needless to say. Next up, people, not much to say about this next game. Number 2, Alabama, who is slowly but surely looking like a pretty dang good team. Number 2, Alabama. In tennis, they call it a bagel. They bageled Mississippi State 41-0. Yeah, it's a bagel. Remember when Mississippi State was like the talk of the SEC? We're like, oh, Mike Leach, KJ Costello, guys, it's gone downhill. I was so excited about them. I think I said it on a previous podcast. I was like, this is my team. I'm going to ride or die. Well, I'm sorry I let you guys down. The number 2 Alabama football team blanked Mississippi State 41-0 to take the win in Bryant-Denny Stadium Saturday night. This marks the Crimson Tide's first shutout win since dominating Mississippi State 24-0 on November 10th, 2018. Alabama is 6-0 in the season, while the Mississippi State Bulldogs drop to 1-4. After scoring 41 on the night, Alabama has now tallied 35 or more points in each of its last 19 games, the longest streak in major college football history. DeVonta Smith hauled in 4 Mac Jones passes for touchdowns. Jalen Waddle's absence was not felt too hard here. And Jones and Smith were in sync throughout the night. Patrick Surtain closed out a scoring with a 25-yard interception return for a score, and Alabama's defense scored for the third time this season, with Dylan Moses both having 7 stops apiece. So, honestly, not much to say there. Alabama is still number 2, and will probably still be number 2 in the rankings, but they're making swift competition, especially with Clemson struggling this past week. Next up, we have Texas A&M, number 8 Texas A&M against Arkansas. The Arkansas Razorbacks, who have handed a few teams some difficult games, Kellen Mond threw for 260 yards and 3 touchdowns as 8th-ranked Texas Tech built a big lead and held on to victory for a 42-31 victory over Arkansas on Saturday night, extending its winning streak over the Razorbacks to 9 games. Jalen Wedemeyer had a career-high 92 yards receiving with 2 touchdowns, and Ayla Smith ran for a touchdown and caught a touchdown pass in the first half to help A&M win its second straight since losing to number 2 Alabama. Kellen Mond threw touchdown passes of 35, 6, and 15 yards. The senior also added 32 yards to give them 10,000 yards of total offense in his career. The Aggies trailed by 14 at halftime and scored 2 touchdowns in the third quarter while limiting the Razorbacks to a field goal to make it 42-17 entering the fourth quarter. Arkansas scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but the deficit was too big to overcome. Arkansas quarterback Franks threw for 239 yards and 3 touchdowns and ran for 91 yards for Arkansas. Burks had 117 receiving yards and 2 scores. Arkansas has entered the game leading the country with 10 interceptions after grabbing 6 in their last game against Ole Miss. They couldn't force any turnovers against the Aggies on Saturday. This is the first campus meeting between the two teams since the game at Arkansas in 2013. And, that's that. Our final game of the night that we're going to cover is number 10, the Florida Gators go against the Missouri Tigers. I think I've talked about this, but I almost went to Missouri, and really great journalism schools, that's why. But they number 10 Florida defeated the Missouri Tigers 41-17 on Saturday. Florida's offense started slow to say the least, but their defense held firm with a scoring surge late in the second quarter to give the Gators a 2-score lead that extended with a pair of touchdowns in the third quarter. University of Florida carried its 34-7 win late into the fourth quarter and never allowed Missouri to get closer than 24 points en route to its 10th consecutive home win. The only touchdown scored against the Gators came against redshirt senior quarterback Kyle Trask was hit on a throw and led a wounded duck kind of pass and a 59-yard pick six by Missouri's Jarvis Wade. The pick six put Missouri up 7-6 a little over 2 minutes in the second quarter as the Gators settled for a pair of field goals. Florida's offense did get on track late in the second quarter as 36-yard pass from Trask to redshirt sophomore Jacob Copeland drove the Gators to Missouri's 24-yard line. The Gators kept the ball for much of the rest of the game, while transfer receiver Justin Shorter capped with a 2-yard reception for his first collegiate career of the game. Florida shook off some rust in their first game since a tough loss to the previously mentioned Texas A&M back on October 10th, and the Gators showed some momentum heading into next week's highly anticipated rivalry matchup, which, we're excited. Florida's defense, they look amazing. The unit entered the night ranked near the bottom of the FBS in rushing and passing defense, but until Missouri's final 2 drives, the Gators allowed just 171 total offense. Up next, the Gators, like I said, will head to Jacksonville, Florida for their annual rivalry against Georgia. The Bulldogs will win a defensive battle against Kentucky Saturday. In spite of their recent lopsided loss to Alabama Georgia still ranks in the top 20 nationally in total defense and scoring defense. So there you have it, people. That is our instant recaps, not really instant, it's like 24 hours later, of the games this week. I really enjoyed the new format I did, so I think I'm going to stick with that. What's funny is the sun is now set 45 minutes later. The sunset looks really pretty tonight. But thank you guys so much for listening tonight. I really hope you all have a good, healthy night. Please remember to stay safe out there. We're still in a pandemic. I just want to reiterate, when I did go out this weekend, it was with 5 friends that I've seen since March. We didn't go to clubs, we didn't go to big house parties, we literally went to my friend's apartment, and they're people I've seen since March, and we were being incredibly safe, in my opinion. I had a very low-key night in, and I hope a lot of you did as well. I also want to say thank you to everyone helping with the election, and voting, and being a volunteer in any way you can. I'm incredibly stressed with this election. Next episode I will probably record on Wednesday, or maybe even Tuesday, honestly. So Wednesday, I can just recover from the shock of the election. But with all that being said, thank you guys so much for listening tonight. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe to us. It really helps us out, and it means a lot to us. And with all that being said, I will talk to you guys all on Thursday. Have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmc.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.